Hey YouTube, I'm the Code Pilot, and today we're gonna solve a problem. We got a case, but it doesn't have any parts in it. Today, we're gonna build a computer. It's very simple. You basically need 7 components:
a case, power supply, processor, memory, motherboard, storage, and you can do a GPU.
High end, low end, doesn't really matter. I chose a CPU that has graphics enabled, so I did not also have to buy a GPU, but at some point in time, I could extend to that. So let's get started. This is a Corsair 4000 series case. My main PC that I use is a 5000 series case. They have great cable management, a lot of features. This one here came with 3 RGB fans already built in. So automatically it's gonna run better than a lot of computers just because of, you know, RGB. Obviously, the more RGB that you have, the more colors that you can control and the better the computer is gonna run. So first things first, we gotta pull this bottom panel off of here so that we can get access to the power supply area. Now we're gonna pull off the tempered glass panel and hopefully not break it. I have some wipes so I can clean it up a little bit here. I'm going to flip the case over and remove the back panel with these thumb screws. I like the Corsair cases because most everything is very accessible and has thumb screws and it's easy to take off. They have good ventilation. They have filters that are already kind of built in. Pull this shipping tape off of here. These filters come out and they're very easy to clean. Okay, with the case prepared, they come with these Velcro straps that are in here for cable management. Plenty of room. It's really easy to remove, like the storage bays for hard drives and things like that. I've gone with an M.2 solid state drive for this build. 1 terabyte. I'll get more into the hardware that I'm actually putting in here as I'm building it, but for now I just want to kind of get the wires out of the way with so that when we go to slide in the motherboard, it's an easier process. I'm going to pull this PCI card expansion slot holder out of here. It's gonna make the power supply access a little bit easier. I don't have like water cooling or an AIO or anything on this one. I do on my main computer that I use. Now this unit was actually purpose built for the YouTube channel because this will be the computer that runs all the projects, the configuration, all of that. I'll probably set up Linux on it to show you how easy it is to run it under a desktop. We'll get our integrated development environment set up on here, run a few projects. I'll show you how to configure the lighting on it. I'll also probably have a Windows installation on here as well, so like a dual boot situation so that we can run both and kind of go back and forth from tutorial to tutorial. But I think this will be a good machine. It's not overkill or anything like that. We are going to put a Ryzen 7 5 series processor in it. I believe that that's a 8-core, 16-thread processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive, and then there's a peripheral card that's needed to make the USB 3.2 run because I didn't go super high end on the motherboard. This is actually a very obtainable build for someone who's just kind of getting started and doesn't want to spend $5,000. I think that I put this together for just under $700. I went very modest on this machine, but it'll do basically anything that you need it to in this configuration. And you'll see that on this channel. You'll see it in the tutorials that we go through. So the first step is to prep the motherboard for insertion into the case. So we'll put in our IO shield. I went with the TUF Gaming. It's an Asus motherboard with a B550 chipset. It has Wi-Fi 6, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, SpeedIF out. It's got HDMI and DVI output. The processor that I got, like I said, does have onboard graphics, plenty of USB port, good quality for sound and all that. The case itself does have a couple USB ports on the front. So we'll take this IO shield and we'll pop it into here. Or maybe we won't, I don't know. And maybe this will be the end of the video. Okay, there we go. That looks to be seated flush. It is a little bowed, but once the motherboard is in there, we'll be able to bow it back and it should sit flush with it. I'm gonna set the case aside for a moment. This is just a toolkit that I got from Micro Center. It's actually really cool. I use it. It's kind of like my daily carry whenever I'm doing IT repairs, things like that. So we'll get our pointer out of here. We have our screwdriver with the Phillips 1 bit. And I did set aside the screws that we'll need to do this. Really just 8 screws to put the motherboard in, and then 1 screw for the SSD. So again, Phillips with a PH1 bit. You can use any Phillips screwdriver. I just like the one because I like this one because it allows me to get down into narrow spots. So here's our motherboard. And the only components that we really need to install at this point in time are going to be the hard drive and the processor. It does have several fan outputs on here. There's 2 here, 1 for the AIO, 1 for chassis fan here. There's another fan header here and here. There are a few different RGB headers here, 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 and there's another one here. This will do up to 128 gigabytes of RAM, DDR4. We've got 5 PCIe slots and 1 specifically that's a little bit stronger than the others for the GPU. That case is really cool because it comes with an inbuilt GPU support bracket. We won't need it obviously in this case. And you have your CMOS battery. And so we'll need to get in our CPU hard drive. So I think I'll do the hard drive first. Super simple, just 2 screws. I'm going to insert the first hard drive in this machine closest to the CPU, just because this is going to be more difficult to access in the event that I want to add another hard drive. There's another slot right here where I'll be able to put in a second hard drive in here if I choose to. My thinking is that that's going to be more accessible than this one here that's obviously going to be next to the CPU fan. So now that those 2 screws are off, we can peel off the heatsink. Now the heatsink does by default have a plastic liner on here. I did a dry run on this just to make sure that all the components worked. You're gonna wanna remove this plastic liner before you install your CPU in here. The other thing is that there was only the 1 support for the heatsink, but with the form factor of SSD that I got, this is a Crucial P130 Gen 4 NVMe. The distance between the end of the heatsink, there are different sizes for the SSDs, so I did need to install this little standoff right here for the SSD. So it already has a pad that's on here to support it. So we'll slide in our SSD, and then we'll grab one of the teeny tiny little screws that it comes with for the SSD. Push down here. Secure the SSD in place. And then we will reinstall the heatsink. Now the heatsink for the SSD, you'll notice that one of them does have like a detent on it, whereas the other one kind of does, but not really. It's more flat. This detent you're going to want to put on this standoff right here. So as we line that up, that is not it. Okay, that's in. And then we'll line this up. Tighten that down. So next we'll go ahead and install our CPU. So when installing the CPU, you will go to the right with this tab and pull it up. So this is our Ryzen AMD Ryzen 5700G processor. The G indicates that it has inbuilt graphics with it. And there's actually still a little bit of thermal paste on there. We'll repaste it. And again, this is a 8-core 16-thread processor. I will post the clock rating here somewhere on the screen. I want to say it's like 3.2 gigahertz or something like that, but it's going to be more than enough for what we're doing. And there's a notch on this processor. One of the corners has a little indicator on it. And on the motherboard, I'll zoom in on that. There's a square portion that indicates where that notch indexes. So we want to install it, set it in there. Don't try to force it. If it doesn't go in, make sure that it doesn't have any bent pins. If it has bent pins, there are ways to unbend them. You can use a razor blade, but if you just recently purchased it, I'd recommend taking it back and returning it, because bending those pins back is a nightmare. It used to be really easy on older processors, but now not so much, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of pins on there. So it's slotted in correctly. And you notice this actually popped down a little bit. Now what you do is you close this arm back over the detent, and now our processor has been slotted in place. For our fan, I'm actually using the default AMD fan. I wonder if I have another fan somewhere. Yeah, don't know. I'm gonna go ahead and use the default AMD fan, but because it does have the standoffs on here, the motherboard comes with these clips that certain fans will just index into there and you can clip it down and secure it. But since this fan already came with kind of like thumb screws, they're spring loaded in here to ensure even pressure. But because we're gonna use this fan, I have to remove these brackets here. When you do this, you want to do it on a flat surface, because there's a mounting bracket under it that I will show you that these screws are actually screwed into. So we'll remove these 4 screws and we'll set these aside. We won't throw these away. Typically when I build a computer, I don't throw anything extra away, just because A, I'm in IT, and B, I may actually need it later. If I want to change up this computer and say I do go to a fan that will clip into that, I'll need these brackets later. And so this is that bracket that I had mentioned that sits under the motherboard that fan is going to screw into. So if you're not doing this on a flat surface and this falls out, you'll have to realign this back in. And you can't really mess it up. It only really goes in here one way. Well, 2 ways, but you know, because of rectangles being what they are. I'm going to use this CPU fan header here. There's a couple reasons. Number one, it's labeled the CPU fan, so I can know what my actual CPU fan speed is. And number two, there's channels in these heat sinks here that you can actually hide this wiring. I'll show you how to do a little bit of cable management so you don't have forbidden spaghetti everywhere on this thing. So we'll get our cable into the fan so it comes out in a proper orientation, like so. And then I'm going to go like this, and I should be able to loop and loop around. Yeah, see, if I do it that way, I won't have the distance, but if I do it this way, I will. And you will need some thermal paste. I'm going to try and link in the description. If I don't do it, I apologize, but I'm going to try and set up an Amazon affiliate store for basically everything that I purchase and use and buy. If you choose to use my affiliate store, I'd really appreciate it because it helps me out a little bit and it doesn't cost you anything to do that. It just kind of helps me a little bit, which allows me to make more content for you. So there's a lot of different ways that you can thermal paste a processor. What I like to do is just get enough on here You know, you could just put it like that, and then assuming that you have enough, it'll evenly spread around. But typically use about that much. And then I have this really cool spreader that actually came with the thermal paste that I purchased, the Corsair thermal paste. So I have a very official thermal paste applicator here. You could just use like a business card or credit card or any number of things. I mean, I could probably even use this spudger and do it if I had some patience. Do keep some kind of wipes or something handy. These are Windex electronics wipes, which I'll also try and link down in the description. But if you get this stuff on your clothes, the likelihood of it coming off is not very high. So it's always good to kind of have something around where you can get that thermal paste off of wherever you don't want it. We're just going to spread the thermal paste, try and get a nice even coat on here. Okay, and as we tighten down that fan, the rest of it on this portion will actually spread that out evenly. It doesn't need to go all the way to the edge, but just enough to where when you apply the fan, it'll go on evenly. You know, and then great for cleaning off our thermal paste applicator. Good on you, Corsair. Any thermal paste will do. You can check the manufacturer specifications on it to see how long it lasts. But typically if it's applied well, you shouldn't have any problems. So we'll go ahead and place the fan, get it aligned here. Okay, that looks good. We're gonna go in an X pattern here. So we'll start here. Okay, that one's in. That one's in. That one's in. And this one's in. Now these are spring loaded, but the purpose of that metal thing on the bottom is twofold. Number one, it stops you from putting too much pressure on the motherboard. And number two, it obviously serves as a screw conduit for the screws themselves to go into. So we'll just go ahead and continue tightening until it stops. Okay, that one's done. Let's go back to over here. Okay, that one's done. And that one's done. So now we have our processor installed, our fans installed, our hard drive is installed. The thing is with these PC connectors is it's really difficult to really mess something up just because they really only fit in one place. I mean, you could try and plug this fan into the RGB header, but the fact that it has these little notches here, I'll try and post a blown up view of them. The fact that you have these notches, it's really only going to plug into a spot where a fan can plug in. Like right here. And now our fan is in. Now I'm going to try and route the wiring such that it's semi-hidden, but still accessible. That's the key, because part of cable management is the management portion. Like, yes, you do want it hidden and out of the way so that you have a clean build, but you also need to manage your cabling in a way that you can get to it later. Okay, I think that looks good. So now we'll go ahead and install our memory. And sticking with the Corsair theme, I went with Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4. This is not the RGB version. They do have it where you can make it all colorful and all that. But again, this is kind of like my secondary project starter budget computer. My other one does have it. Any DDR4 RAM will do. We have plenty of room for expansion here. I have two modules, and we're going to want to install these in the A1 and B1 modules, which are the two gray modules on this motherboard. Now, obviously, if you had 4 modules, you can install them in the 4 slots, and that would be fine. But in this case, because we are using only 2 modules, we want to refer to the documentation and install them where the manufacturer, the people that are far smarter than I, tell me where to install them. I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel here. This is where things might start to sound expensive. Might be making very expensive, very concerning sounds here. So you slide the first module in and it'll make a click sound. Okay, that's one side, and here's the other side. Okay, first module in. And they only go in one way. On DDR4, you want the slot, obviously, to be in the right position. But the configuration of the motherboard, it's a little weird because it's showing Tough Gaming going this way, but it shows Corsair pointing this way and the fan facing that way. But that slot will only go in one position, and if you look down into the memory channels themselves, you will see, if I can get it in frame here, there we go. You'll see that that notch there is offset that this RAM will index into. So we'll put in our other module. So our storage is now in, our CPU is in, our RAM is in the motherboard. We can set the motherboard aside because now we're going to go ahead and put the power supply into the case. So here's our power supply. It's a GameMax GM500 power supply. It's very mid-grade. It is a bronze, 80 plus bronze power supply. It will work for this application. There are much better power supplies out there. I am not going to lie. I think that this one was maybe like 80 bucks, maybe even 65, something like that. So not breaking the bank here, but it will work for our purposes. Obviously, if you have a higher power GPU, you know, 4080, something like that, 50 series GPU, you're going to want something a little bit higher rated than this. But for this case, with the Ryzen 7, the storage that we have, no external GPU, I'm not going to throw a bunch of hard drives in this machine. This will work in this case, and it's fully modular, so it makes installation much, much easier. To install the power supply unit, we have to do a couple things. We have to remove this shroud, which is the power supply shroud. So there's one screw there. The manual says that there's one screw holding in the power supply shroud, but there are actually 2. And then the power supply shroud, you kind of rotate it a little bit, it'll come right out. So now we're going to mount our power supply, and we want our fan facing down because this chassis does have ventilation in the bottom with this really cool cleanable filter here as well. So it has built-in ventilation, so we want to make sure that our power supply fan is facing towards the bottom of the case. So we'll get that aligned. So we'll get the power supply aligned, and there are 2 thumb screws to hold the power supply in. So very convenient. If I can get that lined up, should be right there. There we go. Okay. Now our power supply is mounted. Now in this case, our power supply did come with many cables. It came with cables for the GPU. It came with cables for drives. Here's like the GPU or PCIe cable that we can use. But in this case, we only need 2 cables. We need the ATX power connector, and this goes to the motherboard. And we need the CPU connector. This also goes to the motherboard. So what I will do is these are labeled. Side is labeled CPU. This side is not labeled. So they will only go in one way into this power supply unit. So the first one is our CPU, and we plug that into one of the CPU ports. And our second one is our ATX power, and that's going to plug into the ATX ports. So that's going to be one here. And as you're doing this, you want to kind of make sure that you're managing your cables so that they're not going through each other in case you have to remove them or change something up later on. Okay, that's plugged in. Now what I want to do is I want to switch this to the right side of the case. And I want to pull my wire bundle from my power supply through the case so that it's sitting on this side and out of the way and making life easier for installation of the motherboard. Now, another panel that I had removed is this storage panel for hard drives and devices, and it shows you where those can mount. This panel normally sits right here. And you may actually be able to leave it in there. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in like that. But if you had hard drives or something that you were mounting, you could mount them here. And then you would put the screws that come with the case through to mount your hard drives here. There's also hard drive mounting positions down here as well. So you can actually mount up to 4 2.5-inch discs, or I think 2 3.5-inch discs in here. But just with these thumb screws, this panel unscrews and pops out for easy mounting. And then you just pop it back in there. And you can actually scoot this further if you want. You can have it there depending on the size of your power supply, your cabling. So I'm just going to leave mine in the default position because the case is not super packed. And one day I'll show you the desktop that I use as my daily driver. And that's a fairly packed case. I think I have 4 hard drives in there, a GPU, PCIe cards. That case is pretty well packed out. Now that we have our power supply unit installed, we can go ahead and put the power supply shroud back in, and then from there we can install the motherboard. Okay, and then this is 3 Phillips screws. We're going to use the flat-headed Phillips screws for reinstallation of the power supply shroud. So there's one. There's 2. And there's 3. Okay, now we have our power supply. Now we've come to the point to install the motherboard into the chassis. The standoffs are actually marked with respect to what type of motherboard it supports. This particular case will support an ATX, an MATX, an ITX, or an EATX motherboard. But what you need to make sure is that these standoffs are in the correct positions, and they've done a really great job actually labeling. So this is an ATX motherboard that we're installing. So I just need to make sure that my standoffs are all in the A ports. A. They're all in the correct positions. The standoff in the middle actually has a little nub on it that will index into the motherboard when it's properly aligned, just allowing you to put in this situation, 8 screws for the motherboard. Now you don't ever want to touch the components on the motherboard itself. You want to grab it by the edges. You can use the fan if it's securely installed in there. You can use this heat sink here. We'll also support it. You don't want to grab it by the RAM, but definitely by the edges. You also want to try not to run your hand under the motherboard, because these contacts, you can conduct static electricity and end up blowing something up potentially. So once we've aligned our motherboard with the IO shield in the back, I'll actually see if I can do it in this position here so that you can see the alignment of the installation. I actually got a better angle here so that you can see it index in and align. So we'll align these ports in the IO shield, aligning with the standoffs. Okay, that's aligned. Our standoffs are aligned. And our middle point is aligned, so now I can actually just rotate this because it's sitting on that middle port. And you can see that that middle standoff is sitting in that port right there. So now we use 8 screws to secure the motherboard to the chassis. These are also the flat-headed screws, the same screws which are used with the case itself for that power supply shroud. This case does support taking the motherboard tray out and mounting the motherboard to it and then putting it in. But what I was finding is that with the power supply shroud in, which is easier to put in after the fact, it's difficult to line up the IO shield on the back just because this has Wi-Fi ports on it. I'm assuming if maybe this didn't have Wi-Fi ports and the back was a little bit more flush, it would be a lot easier to install. But in my particular situation, I just found that it was much easier to leave the tray in and then mount the motherboard to it and install it. Should you choose to remove the tray to install your motherboard, there are 4 screws to do that. There's one through this hole, there's one through this hole, there's one here, and there's one here, and then this whole tray will lift out. It will flip out this way. But again, because of the IO shield alignment and these Wi-Fi ports, it just really wasn't the move for this particular motherboard. If this is a little bit flatter, like if these weren't here, it would have made it much easier. Now, because this motherboard does not have a USB, I believe this is a Type E connector or Type A connector. There's a certain name for it. I'll post it on the screen now. But because this motherboard did not have this particular plug in it, I just purchased this card. I think it was like $19 or $20 or something like that on Amazon. That's going to add back that USB front port ability to use that. So we'll go ahead and install that PCI card now. Before that card goes in, I do want to put the card panel back on. So nicely indexes here. Two thumb screws. And I'm gonna put that in this slot right here. And the reason for that is that I know that I'm going to need to get to these ports that are down here. Try to get an angle here. Maybe we should go this way. There we go. Probably like that. Maybe. I know that I'm going to need to access these ports down here to install all of the cabling from the case itself to integrate the motherboard with the case and the power. So I'll go ahead and install into this PCI slot. I may need to move this at some point in time if I install a GPU in this machine. It's still kind of up in the air. Based on the alignment of this card, I'm going to want to remove this cover right here. So we'll pull that thumb screw out. The cover comes out like that. We will take our PCI card, align the back and push down. Okay, now that's in. And we will reinstall the thumb screw to secure the card. And installing a GPU would be the same. Basically, depending on how tall your GPU is, you would remove more than likely these two, possibly these two. Slide the GPU into place. Install power from your power supply using the PCIe power adapter into the GPU. Now that everything is basically installed into the case, we'll go ahead and start routing the cabling where it needs to go. Now, cable management can be a little bit of an art, but it doesn't need to be super difficult. But you do want to make sure that it ends up being accessible. The 8-pin CPU adapter is going to go through the top because it plugs in here. So we'll place that there. The ATX connector, this big one, plugs in here. So I'm going to route this way. Just for now, I'll use these straps and everything to secure everything where it goes when the time comes. Our front panel adapter is going to connect here. So I'm going to route that up through the power supply shroud. The left side, because the power supply shroud has two different openings in it. Our audio is going to connect here. So I will route that through. And this guy is going to plug into the PCI card that we installed. So I'm also going to route that through the, I guess it would be the front panel of the CPU shroud. Our fans for RGB and power for the front of the chassis are going to connect here and here. So I'm going to route those through this side of the power supply shroud. Can just kind of slide these like that. It's okay, we can route that through that side of the power supply shroud. So now all of our cables have been routed around to the front. So we'll flip the case back over again. And we will start plugging in our connectors. So the first one is our front panel, and our front panel connects right here on our motherboard. Now there's a notch in one of these, and that notch is in the middle here. Okay, so that's our front panel. Now we have our fans. And this fan header here is labeled CHA fan for our chassis fans. Our front panel USB and audio is going to connect over here. So I'm going to not have this be a bunch of spaghetti here. And I'm going to route that with the ATX connector that ends up connecting in the front over here. These are RGB headers for the fans and the chassis. The RGB header that the Corsair case comes with has one knocked out. So we want to make sure that we don't use the 4-pin, which is this one. We want to use the 3-pin, which is one of these two here. Okay, that's secured. Next comes our audio. And our audio header, I believe, is this one. Yeah, AAFP. That's audio front panel. It does have one of the pins knocked out, as does this. So we'll connect that right there. Then our front panel USB, which will go into our PCI card. Many motherboards actually already have this adapter on there, so you won't have to worry about getting that PCI card. But if you get this particular motherboard, in this case, you will need to. Okay, that's secure. Next, we'll do the rest of our front panel. Those go here. You'll notice that on the power connectors, which we'll be plugging in next, the Molex plugs, some of them are squared and some of them are not necessarily pentagon shaped, but they have cut corners on two of the sides, so they'll only go in one way. Also, there's a clip on here to help you remove it. That clip is only going to be, it's only going to lock in on one side. In this case, it's right here. Okay, so that's secure. And then the last one to go in is our CPU connector, and it sits up here. Okay, so now everything's plugged in, and what we want to do is hook it up to a monitor and see if it goes through a power on self-test and make sure that we have a display. We want to power on the machine beforehand, before we do any cable management, to make sure that we did not miss any cables and that everything is working properly. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this into the display port of my primary machine. Okay, so I have the power plugged in, or the HDMI plugged in. The power supply is set to on, and there's actually some RGB coming off of this board right now, which is a good sign. So there are signs of life. And then now I'll go ahead and hit the power button on it. And on one of these two monitors, we should see some kind of display. Okay, it's powering on, RGB is on, fan is going. Maybe over here. The light's white. That's a good sign. Ah, there we go. So here's the results of our post. It shows the AMD Ryzen 7 5700G with the Radeon graphics. 3.8 gigahertz. There you go. 8 cores, 16 threads. 32,768 megabytes of DDR4 RAM. That's 32 gigs. And it is showing our hard drive on there, the M2 in slot 1, CT1000. That's 1 terabyte of storage. So I think that we're looking good here. Let's go ahead and do some cable management, get this baby all buttoned up. Now, a couple quick notes on fan installation. I like my fans to blow this way and up, because that's the way that heat travels. The power supply is pulling it up and out. These fans are blowing this way. This fan is blowing that way, drawing air in and out. If I had more fans in here, these would obviously be going that way. My fans at the top would be going up, and my fan at the back would be going out, so that we have air traveling in that manner. But for now, let's go ahead and shut this down, and we can go ahead and do our cable management now that we know that everything is working and it's posted correctly. So I'll go ahead and hit the power switch on the back, because we don't have to worry about properly shutting down because we don't have any data on the hard drive. I will pull the power cable. I will pull the DisplayPort cable. I'll go ahead and turn it over and we'll clean some of the spaghetti up. So our CPU power cable, we can route through these Velcro bits here on the back. Kind of rotate those around to provide a better fitment, and we'll go ahead and use this one here because it's more accessible. Actually, could we just go all the way? Nope, that's not going to work. Okay, so we'll use this one here. Okay, now that one is secure. For our front panel USB and our ATX power, we'll go ahead and use this one. We'll try and flatten these out as best we can here. Nope, our front panel came unplugged. Okay, maybe we'll not run the front panel through here. We'll run it along the side. And we'll just kind of let the ATX power cable secure it. And we'll use this one. Okay, that looks good. For these, we'll kind of pull them taut. I think there's one more down there. Yep. Okay. And we can use, where can we go with these? We can go to this one. Keeping our CPU in there, in that same bundle. And then what we can do is keep these in the same order. We should be able to zip tie these to here. I had some zip ties here somewhere. You can use Velcro ties too, if that's easier for you. Does not want to cooperate with me. Perfect. Okay. I'll just kind of zip tie these. Not super tight, but just enough so that they don't go weeble wobbling everywhere. Beautiful. That's perfect. Now we'll take a look at the front and see how that looks. We'll get this strapped back through here. But again, just plenty of cable management options in this case. Velcro here, Velcro along the back. I do have some other Velcro straps somewhere, allegedly, but not too worried about those. And we'll need to plug this back in. Okay, we'll route that back through there. We do have a little bit more slack on this power supply cable. And we have a little bit of slack here, but there's not a lot that we can really do about that. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for this cable management. This is just going to be a bench computer, so it'll do everything that we need. You can obviously spend 2 hours in here kind of going through everything, redoing the loom that comes through the bottom here and rerouting all these cables. But in this case, oh man, that's a horrible pun. In this situation, I'm perfectly happy with how this turned out. So we'll go ahead and get the panels back on here, get it all buttoned up and get it going and make some tutorials for you. So we'll do our cable cover side first. I do have some fingerprints on this tempered glass, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up before I close it. This is Sprayway. It's a fantastic product. This one's a little dirty, but Sprayway glass cleaner. It's great. I've been using it for years. No streaks. I don't believe it's actually ammonia based either, so it's not super stinky. No streaks. Just a super clean piece of glass. That looks beautiful. Okay, now the other side. Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay. So we'll grab this by the edges. There are metal panels on the inside of it, so you don't have to touch the glass itself. Just beautiful. Lock in the thumb screws. And on to the next. So that's all I got for you today on how to build a computer. It doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be expensive. Stay tuned, like and subscribe so that you can see the next iteration of this, which is going to be installing 1 or probably 2 operating systems on here so that we can use it as our learning machine. Really appreciate your time. That's all I got. Okay, bye.